Hi, and welcome back to Financial Education Fridays. My name is Jim, and I'm your host for these episodes. Okay, let's see some of the administrative stuff. This here series on how an economy grows. This is part three. It's based upon the book How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes by Peter D. Schiff. You can see the link for that in the body of the post here if you want to go out and purchase it. Basically, it's a story his father told him about how an economy grows and, of course, why it crashes. And he put it into book form. So we're kind of like, just going to go over it because I found it to be very insightful and to have some kind of understanding because we really don't think about economics generally on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and this here helps you to understand how things get started and why an economy moves and how it affects your everyday life, even though you don't realize it. So this here is part three. You can also find the links for part two and part one, in the body of the post here. So click on those and watch those if you haven't watched them before. So and we're going to move forward here. What we're going to do here is we're going to recap. Okay. Um, the this here basically started with um, Abel, Baker, and Charlie. All right. They all lived on an island. They were all able to, they kind of just subsisted. They lived. They were able to catch one fish each day by themselves. Abel came up with the idea of making a fish catcher, a net, and that allowed him to catch two fish. Right. Now, in order to come up with the net, he had to actually not catch fish for one day. Now, they consumed one fish each and every day. But now Abel, he decided to not do anything for one day and build this fish catcher. He took a risk, he made a sacrifice, and he produced something that allows him to catch two fish. So now he has a surplus. He can eat one fish and he has one extra fish, and this gives him more time in order to do the things that he wants to do. Build himself a house. Work on his dreams, whatever that may be. Okay, whereas Baker and Charlie, they both have to continue to try to catch one fish a day in order to be able to live. Now, Abel, Baker and Charlie can see that Abel has two fish, and they want, they want some, so they want a better life also. So Abel has a choice. He can either say, okay, I can lend you the fish, that the surplus that he gets, or he can lend the fish catcher. And um, he Abel, when he looks at it, he doesn't want Baker and Charlie to uh, borrow the net. Okay, for the simple reason they may not return it or they may damage it, and he's out. Sure, he'd have to sacrifice again and build another one, but lending the net isn't such a good idea. Okay, like I said, what if it's broken or it isn't returned? Okay. Um, Abel could lend them the fish. I mean, after all, he has, one additional fish of surplus. Okay. Now, the thing about this here is, um, you know, if Baker and Charlie don't have to do anything. Okay. If they say, oh, lend me the fish, well, so that I can take this, time and build a net. Well, what if they do a poor job on the net? Okay, because they're getting the fish, they might not put forth the right effort to build a net for themselves. And if they don't build a net, how are they going to repay the loan of the one extra fish that they get each and every day? Okay, um, it's not such a good idea. Okay, and then also too, the issue is well, what are the terms of lending the fish? I mean, you know, Abel has one fish, but if he lends the net to Baker and Charlie, he can say, well, I want one fish back in return, so he gets 100% a return on his investment. Okay. Well, Baker and Charlie, they'll be able to catch, you know, they work and they catch one fish, well, actually two fish, um, and they eat one each, and they'd have one left over between the two of them. They could pay off the one fish, but is that too much of a return um, for Baker and Charlie? I mean, they're basically working for nothing. They're not going to be able to kind of like get ahead. Um, so, um, you know, uh, and is this worth extending the credit to Baker and Charlie? I mean, think about it. Today interest rates on automobiles are very, very low. Okay, but what if you have poor credit? Okay, well, if you have poor credit, you know, I mean, today, like I bought a van a couple of years ago, and I paid 4% interest. All right, it's a new used van. All right, but what if I had poor credit and I wouldn't be able to get the van? Well, I can go to some other place where they'll lend me the van. I mean, they'll lend me the money for the van, but they might charge 18%, or 25% interest. Okay, it's about risk versus reward. Which is it better? If he felt these guys aren't gonna, keep up their end, he has to charge more interest in order to make it worth his investment. Because remember, what if he doesn't get it back? Look at rent-a-centers. They have furniture and you know washing machines and refrigerators. They charge such a high interest rate on these items. Um, and I mean, the person who buys it, basically they could have bought in three by the time they pay it off. Okay, but these are people who don't have the cash up front in order to go and buy that $600 washing machine, uh, or they have bad credit, they can't get it, so they end up paying the higher interest rate. So when Abel is lending Baker and Charlie, uh, he has to take into consideration you know what is going to be his return on his investment. Okay. Now, we have to remember that, Abel 1, he doesn't need, um, you know, to make the loan and take the risk, okay? I mean, he can hold on to his fish, right, for future use, okay? Baker and Charlie would go out and every day have to, catch the one fish. That's what they've always been doing. Abel, he can hold on to um, those two fish, and then he can also consume his excess, right? So one day he works, one day he doesn't, okay? Because he's consuming his own savings. Um, 3, he could build a company, okay? Now, in building the company, right, he could build a net company. In other words, I'm going to, with my extra one day, he can manufacture additional nets, okay? And he can charge and he can rent those nets out to Baker and Charlie. He can charge one half a fish per day, all right, to Baker and Charlie. And if he did that, he'd never have to work again. Why? Because he'd have the multiple nets, he'd get a half a net, a half a fish from Baker, and he'd get a half a fish from Charlie, right? Which means he's getting his one fish, right? When you look at Baker and Charlie, they're going to use the net. They're going to catch two fish. They're going to eat one, and they're going to uh, repay the loan of, the rental of the net of a half a fish, and that means they also have a surplus of a half. Okay, um, so this here is, a complete win-win situation, all right, for, all of them. If he builds a net rental company, remember, it's not worth it for him to give them the fish because they're getting something for nothing without doing any labor. If he gives them the nets, they can, just to borrow, they can not return it or they can break it. All right. But if he takes his extra time and he builds a net company, a net rental company, he can work it so that he never has to work again, and they also can you know catch their fish, and then they also can have surplus. Okay, and that's the beginning of an economy. Okay, now let's see here. Uh, number four. All right, oops. All right, number four. Um, he can lend his two fish to them at 100% interest, right? Um, but that would be at risk of his being stiffed. Okay, again, we covered that. I give it to them, they don't return it. And number five, he could combine any of those options. Okay, right, so he had like five options that he he could do. And obviously, from looking at these options, I would think number 3 would be the winning idea. Why? Because this is all about risk versus reward. All right. Um, and that's all it is at this point. Abel is thinking about what's my risk and what's my reward. Okay. He put the sacrifice in. He, took a risk. He was able to produce so that he had an excess. Now, how can he take that and benefit everyone else? Sure, he's going to try to reduce his risk because obviously he doesn't want to lose all of the nets. And he also wants to get a return on his investment, the reward. Okay. Um, but notice what's happening here. Okay. Um, what is demand? Okay. Demand is the desire to want more. Okay. Now, Abel wanted more, right? He wanted a better life instead of having to work and catch fish all day. So he wanted more. And he was able to create, because of that desire to want more, um, whatever he gets, he can consume it, all right, and then replace it, okay, and that creates the beginning of an economy, right? In other words, demand is what drives an economy and using it up. I want this, and then when I use it, I need to create more because I still want more, okay? And that's where the beginning of an economy starts at. Right? It's the idea of wanting something, the demand for something. He wanted, to be able to have more than one fish a day. Baker and Charlie, they want more than one fish a day because they saw Abel living a good life, work one day, take one day off. Okay, so it was demand that drives an economy. Now, think about that in your own life. I mean, food, car, house. You want these things: clothes, cell phones, computers, iPads, whatever. That is your demand. You're wanting something. If they weren't available, you wouldn't be able to purchase them, and there would be no money going into an economy. The economy would be stagnant because there would be nothing to purchase. But because people want, they buy it, they consume it, take that cell phone, throw it away, need another one, okay, and that drives an economy. Now, that's one way of looking at how an economy gets started and how an economy grows. Okay, for next week, what we're going to look at is another way of thinking about the economy, okay, and that is from the perspective that you see today in the Fed, where all they do is just print up money, okay? Keynesian economics. Demand here is Austrian economics, okay? But creating money out of nothing, like we're doing with the Fed today, okay, and this idea of entitlement to things, that's another thought about how an economy, starts and runs. And we'll take a look at that next week. Okay, so if you like this video, and you got something from it, follow, like it, reply, put your comments. More than happy to entertain those. And we will see you again next week. Have a great week.